Hi, thank you. Good morning, and thank you, Robert Kurz from the University of Bergen. Thank you for this session. It's very inspiring and interesting.
Hola y buenos días. Hello and welcome, everyone. Since our chair did not appear and we talked about informal leadership, I have assumed role of the chair. Welcome to this talk session. We do have 4 different talks. We have planned like 10 minutes for each talk and a couple of questions if you have them, and then we are just quickly changing. If you have any questions, we have microphones. The first presentation is Gillian Ives from the University of Connecticut. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. The title of my talk is Communities of Practice as a Balancing Act. And I apologize, I've lost my voice a little bit, but I'll try to, I have water in case it comes in and out. Great. So communities of practice, they have many offshoots and other names people refer to them as, such as professional learning communities and faculty learning communities. They're pretty well-established practice by now in higher education. We've mostly all heard of them, but they are generally referring to a group that comes together to engage on an issue or some kind of enterprise and work together on that issue. And the literature indicates that communities of practice can support faculty learning and implementing inclusive and evidence-based teaching practices. Are these on auto advance? Evidence-based teaching practices, curricular form, and even lead towards institutional change. And so these are well-established kind of evidence in the literature that faculty, communities of practice can be really beneficial. Yet communities of practice are often an ambiguous concept, and it kind of remains unclear for a lot of people of what makes one team really successful and another fall apart. And we can all think about examples of faculty learning communities from our own experience that some that worked really well together, gelled, got their accomplished things, got things done, and then other teams that maybe had a lot of interpersonal dynamic issues, bickering, not working well together, and not accomplishing anything, just kind of sitting there and spinning their wheels. So as educational developers are often responsible for developing, supporting, or sustaining faculty communities of practice across an institution, it's really important that we understand the key structures and characteristics that can make one community of practice successful or not so successful. And so some background context from where I'm coming from. The auto advance is throwing me off a little, sorry. But I'm an educational researcher for a program that worked with 16 different institutions across the United States. And these were 2-year community colleges, and so they were Hispanic-serving institutions as well in the United States. So they all get awarded associate's degrees. And we created teams of up to 10 members each. So that ended up being about 100, it was up to 10, so it was 148 participants. And it was a cross-disciplinary and cross-functional team. And so that was made up of faculty from different STEM disciplines specifically, administrators like department chairs and deans, and staff members as well. So we had library support staff who were working with STEM faculty, student affairs support staff, people running grants and programs for STEM students specifically. And the focus of the communities of practice were to improve STEM teaching and learning for students. And they went through an 18-month program. And they started with forming together as a community of practice. And then they really dug into their data, their institutional research data, to look at where their gaps, equity gaps were, where students weren't succeeding in retention and graduation data. And they performed a SWOT analysis on that data. So that's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And that's where they really dug into where's a problem that we can address, where's the root of that problem, and developed a plan to address that problem as a community of practice. And so, for example, some of those tended to be like one institution worked to put on workshops for students for STEM identity and STEM belonging. Another created had Center for Teaching and Learning staff, and they had worked with them to create a pedagogical library that faculty could consult to improve their teaching. But what we noticed is that some of these community practice teams thrived and accomplished their goals in the 18-month program, and others had high member turnover, disengagement, and didn't accomplish their plan. So here I'm going to offer some key insights when we looked at 2 cohorts, which 6 institutions, what made some teams effective while others failed to thrive. And so the key message here is that effective communities of practice are really an active balance. And to illustrate that, we really thought of a seesaw on a playground, if you're familiar with those structures of trying to balance some characteristics and structures in a community of practice. So first I'm going to talk about diversity of team membership. And I don't mean diversity in terms of social identities, although that is really important. But in this context, because these were cross-disciplinary and cross-functional teams, it was diversity in roles and experience. And so the community practice members really valued learning from each other when members offered new perspectives on an issue. So often we're in silos, and so all the faculty were used to working together, and all the support staff or administrators were used to working together, but when they were brought together, they offered new perspectives that they hadn't heard before, and they hadn't understood those roles before. And so, but on the other hand, having too many new members also made the team disjointed, as they often lacked trust. So it was really important to balance having new perspectives and new members with having membership where there were prior working relationships, because that encouraged trust and working together. And so if it was a team that had people that were not used to working together too much, they tended to fall apart because they didn't trust each other to engage in this process. So it was really a balance of having a diverse team of membership and roles and bringing new people into the fold, as well as having prior working relationships. So I'm going to offer 2 examples of quotes of this team. This quote from on the left. We started with some cohesiveness, and we ended up with more cohesiveness. And this team had some prior working relationships, so they already had some members that gelled together and had worked together. And then with those new people that they brought in, they ended up with even more cohesiveness. And on the other hand, a team that had few prior working relationships, there were a few junior faculty who were not used to working with the team and were new, especially the few that were hired during COVID and had worked remotely and never met people in person before. And this one junior faculty member discussed feeling tossed in a little bit too soon and uncomfortable sharing their perspective with the senior faculty members who had established roles and relationships at the institution. And so that participant ended up dropping out. They felt very not engaged and not invited into the community. So tolerance for ambiguity also emerged as an essential balance in communities of practice, particularly when teams were asked to interrogate local data and reconsider their assumptions about why those equity gaps existed, and design new approaches to serving students. So rather than moving quickly to predetermined solutions, participants were invited to remain in a space of uncertainty about both problems and interventions. And this was really difficult for some team members who wanted to rush through looking at the data and talking about why those gaps existed and wanted to jump right to getting to solutions. And so, but when this work was, on the other hand, when the work was structured and intentionally framed as iterative and exploratory and had concrete supports, leadership backing, peer encouragement, it created a balance of challenge and support that helped participants remain in that place of uncertainty and explore those challenges. And in this way, tolerance for ambiguity became not only a condition for sustaining the community practice work, but also an important outcome of members' participation in them. And so some examples here on the left with structured critical reflection. The data we received from our institutional research was all new to me, and we've had subsequent discussions of related data, and this was a written reflection, the number of transfers and years to completion that have been new and useful context for what we were trying to accomplish. And so they found the data exploration really useful to sit in that and think about new understandings of that data. And on the other hand, when there was less engagement, this member talked about when we reviewed the self-assessment results, they're talking about the data results, and began our data inquiry tool plan. That's when I realized I hadn't done the work to feel like I could engage wholly in the conversation. And so the participants in that team didn't really do the work to really engage and sit in critical reflection on that data. And so they didn't have good productive conversations about interrogating assumptions about why those gaps were there. So what we can learn from these characteristics and structures that help some communities of practice excel and others flop. As educational developers create, support, and facilitate and sustain communities of practice, they require effective strategies to see positive impact. And so we can consider balancing core and periphery members, which if you're familiar with community practice literature, the core members are often the ones that are more engaged and have those prior relationships, and we're trying to bring in periphery members of the new perspectives that can really be beneficial to a team. And so trying to balance new and established relationships on campus, really consider bringing in some new people who serve, and so we don't just have the key people who serve on every committee that tend to get tagged and recruited for all the activities and who are very involved in centers for teaching and learning, but try to bring new people into that fold, and then so they can balance new and core members. And so also, it's important to treat faculty as adult learners. They're just like the students, and when they're engaging some new perspective of engaging that critical reflection of the data. And so engaging in adult learning theories and strategies, faculty, just like students, need a balance of support and challenge to thrive in their learning. And so designing activities that allow for this balance will let them do some deeper thinking, critical reflection, and increased engagement. And changing attitudes and beliefs and values can be really disorienting. Goes beyond, can be disorienting and require support for that critical reflection. So providing tools and structures to support their learning in those difficult moments can really help that team success. Thank you.
That's fine. Are there any questions? We have 2 minutes for questions. Yes?
What I hear now is that the bad performing communities, they can't really be called community of practice, can they?
No.
No. So the term in itself is very ideological, isn't it?
Yes, I would say so. I mean, to really engage, when you think about the community practice literature, to engage together on a practice and work together. If people drop out and there's high member turnover, that really is an engagement. So I think, I would agree. I'm not sure if there was more of a question or if it was a statement, but I would agree that, yes. It was a structured program, so there was a community practice and a leader, and there was a program that existed for that 18 months. Whether they ended up functioning like a community practice or not. Yes.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we need to change presenters. The next one is Roland Tormey. You're talking about the emotional academic developer.
Hello. Yes, my name is Roland Tormey. I work in the École Polytechnique Fédérale in Lausanne. I'm really happy to be here today and talk to you about the emotional academic developer. Let me start with a quotation. Let me start with this quotation. This is from Andy Hargreaves, a Canadian teacher education researcher you may know. Good teachers are not just well-oiled machines. They are emotional, passionate beings who connect with their students and fill their work and their classes with pleasure, creativity, challenge, and joy. I hope you recognize that as a description of good teaching, right? But I think what's interesting about it, what's striking about it, is that's not normally the way we talk about teaching. Normally we talk about teaching in terms of knowledge and cognition. Sometimes it's content knowledge, sometimes it's pedagogical content knowledge, but we focus a lot on the cognitive part of teaching and maybe not so much on the emotional part. So this is what I want to talk to you a little bit about. I started out as a researcher, as an educator in the 1990s. In Ireland at the time, we were coming to the end of a period of conflict, and I was working on how we do peace education and intercultural education within our schools. And when I looked at the literature, what I saw was a lot about cognition. I saw a lot about how people thought about each other, their mental models of each other. And when I went into classrooms, when I talked to kids about how they interacted with each other, they talked about emotions. They talked about the joy, the effervescent joy of belonging, feeling like they belonged in a group. They talked about fear of others. They talked about disgust for others. The stories they told, the mental representations they had, the stories they told were often, it wasn't about the cognitive part of it. It was the emotional part of it, which was what was important. When they talked about how other people ate, it was the disgust that was important in it, not what the person was eating. They talked about compassion. They talked about distress at another person's distress when they saw examples of injustice. They talked about anger at injustice. And I saw this not represented in the literature. The literature was about cognition, but people's interactions, of course, part of it is cognitive. It's not that the cognitive is unimportant, but it's that cognition does not exist outside of feeling. Feelings are intertwined and wrapped through cognition. And actually, most of our literature ignores that, right? Going back to Descartes said we need to separate out these things. We need to separate the mind from the body. The body is impure. Let's not talk about the body. Let's talk about the high and beautiful mind. Yeah? And this notion then fed its way into psychology as it developed as a discipline. We all still talk about learning outcomes as if we can separate cognitive from affective, from psychomotor, as if those three things are not combined. We're still using a language from the 1950s, which has been long since bypassed by researchers looking at emotion and looking at cognition and looking at embodied cognition. Yet these terms, these words, are deeply embedded into what we do and the practices and the way in which we think about what we're doing. So I wanted to work with teachers and kids in terms of how to live in these emotional spaces. And I realized that in order to help the kids with the emotions that they were experiencing, we needed to help teachers to be able to manage that space. And so I worked with a brilliant PhD student called Roisin Corcoran, and we developed this approach to developing emotional competences, was the term we used at the time, with student teachers. When we started this work, one of the things we realized is that lots of people in the 1990s were talking about emotion, but actually, in many cases, they were doing so in quite theoretically ungrounded ways. There was stuff people were reading in magazines, and that plus common sense was what was driving the way in which we talked about emotion. And again, we wouldn't do that for cognition. Right? We would want to have strong theoretical models for thinking about cognition. So we wanted to base our work on strong theoretical models, and that's what we tried to do. We developed this. It was a lovely project, but in the end I was dissatisfied. I was dissatisfied because we focused in on the emotional competencies of the teacher as an individual. But what interested me in emotions in the first place was the way in which they operated as a social glue, if you like. And so I spent the years, the 10 years after this, trying to figure out about how to make sense of the social dimension of emotions in learning environments. Emotions are a driver. The word emotion, it comes from the word emotare, that which moves us. So emotions are a driver, they move us. But they also locate us in relation to others. Awe tells us how we locate ourselves in relation to another person. Guilt tells us how we relate ourselves in relation to another person. And they are, if you like, a social GPS. They tell us how we're related to each other. And then I mentioned the name Andy Hargreaves to you earlier on. Hargreaves talked about this notion of emotional geographies. The idea that we could think in terms of distance and distancing and use emotion as a way of making sense of that. And he kind of separated out, in terms of approach emotions versus distancing emotions. And this was nice. It's a nice way of thinking about it. But, for me, there was a question I was faced with here. This was a one-dimensional way of looking at distance. Is one dimension the right number of dimensions? If I talked about the idea of emotion as a GPS, GPS can position us in relation to others. It can position us in one dimension, where I am, where you are, how far between us. But, it can also position us in two dimensions, right? It can tell us where we are in latitude and longitude, and it can tell us more information than just distance. And actually, it can position us in three dimensions. It can tell us what is our altitude, and not just in terms of our latitude and our longitude. The question for me was how many dimensions were the right number of dimensions to think about emotions? Is it 1? Is it 2? Is it 3? It could have been 25. What was the right number? And this is what I worked on. I tried to make sense of the emotional dynamics of classes and try to understand this question as to what was the right number of emotional dimensions to look at. What I eventually came to after quite a lot of dead ends along the way was the idea that 3 dimensions worked well as a way of making sense of what was happening in the emotional dynamics of a class. We have a dimension which is about safety, and you were talking about sense of safety just a moment ago. This sense that we feel safe with other people. And when we feel that, we feel trust, and when we don't feel it, we feel anxiety. We have another dimension which is about warmth, which is about feeling attachment or a sense of belonging with someone else. And when we feel that, we feel joy. And when we don't feel it, we feel sadness. Oftentimes, this gets confused with safety as if they're the same thing. But think about it. I'm sure you all have a friend that you really, really like, but you wouldn't ask that person to do something that needed to be done. Right? Trust and warmth are actually not the same dimension. They're separate dimensions. Alongside that, we have a dimension which is about status, which is about our sense of pride in ourselves and our sense of awe at someone else. And can we have equal statuses, or do we have separate, really big power differences in that sense and status in our classrooms? This was the model which I eventually developed, which I tested using statistical models, which I won't go into right now, but you can find them in the papers. It worked well. It was a good way of making sense of this emotional dynamic of the classroom. I was really happy, having spent 10 years, to come to an answer that made sense. The thing is, it wasn't just a model which I could stand over in terms of saying this is theoretically strong and empirically validated. It also turned out to be a really useful model. Because as I've mentioned already, these dimensions, separating out these dimensions can be important. Oftentimes, novice teachers tell me that they're told, don't smile when you go into the classroom, don't be friendly, because you need to be authoritative. Well, go back and look at the model. These are 2 different dimensions. You can smile and still be authoritative. The ways in which we create a sense of authority, the ways in which we generate a sense of respect, are not the same as being friendly or unfriendly. People think, well, I need to work really hard on being friendly, but actually, what about the trust dimension? What about being someone that students can rely on, that if you say you're going to do something, you'll do it? What about someone who'll be clear about what their assessment criteria are and when it'll happen and how it'll happen? That doesn't necessarily need a lot of warmth. So this turned out to be really useful, because when we would meet novice teachers who'd say, look, I'm just not good at being friendly with people. It's not who I am. That's why I studied my discipline. You don't have to be friendly. You don't have to be friendly. You can still be trustworthy. When they said, I'm young and students don't respect me, okay, but you can still be trustworthy and you can still be warm. It turned out that this was a really useful way for talking to teachers about how they are in the classroom. It also was really good at talking to them about how they make change happen. So when we talk to teachers about switching from traditional teaching into interactive teaching, asking them what were the emotional dimensions in which they feel they would be losing something and the emotional dimensions in which they could gain something, in that turned out to be a really useful way of having that conversation with them. So, the 1990s, when Andy Hargreaves was writing, or when I was starting out, it's sometimes referred to as the period of the emotional revolution. The emotional revolution, which happened in psychology, in sociology, and neuroscience at the time. And oftentimes that emotional revolution didn't necessarily seem to transport itself into more applied domains. And oftentimes we continue to use more old-fashioned cognitivist frames in kind of more applied domains. But it was really interesting to see that ICED last year had a special issue on trust. And it was also interesting to see that of the 28 papers in ICED over the last 30 years that used the word emotion in the abstract, 8 of those happened in the last 15 months. So the emotional revolution kind of looks like it's happening now. At least here, at least for us. We're in a moment when we could take emotion seriously. And if we take emotion seriously, my question or my request would be that we do so in theoretically sound ways. We do so in ways which are theoretically sound and which are useful. And when we work with faculty, maybe we can try and bring to those relationships a sense of trust, a sense of pride, and a sense of enjoyment. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Any questions? Yes. I would throw it, but I don't trust myself, so.
Thanks very much for that. My name is Rick from University of Groningen. Really nice presentation, enjoyed it quite a bit. I don't mean this to sound critical, it's a very open question. When you work with teachers, how do you talk about this without overwhelming them? That they start overthinking, overanalyzing?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard for 2 reasons. So one is the idea that universities aren't emotional spaces, and so therefore, if they talk about emotion, it's almost perceived to be kind of a weakness. So that's definitely part of it. I think part of what really works is that when they start to think in terms of the fact that the emotions are already in the classroom. You know, it's not that they're bringing emotions into the classroom, they're just actually recognizing the emotions which are there already. They're recognizing the emotions that they're feeling and the students are feeling. And once we get to that, once we get to the fact that these emotions are already in the classroom, well then it's quite easy to say, ignoring them isn't going to make them go away. And so therefore, actually, maybe we can talk about this seriously. And that's usually the way in.
Another question? Yes.
Hi. Super interesting, and I'll definitely go and look at that model. Yes, so I recognize that kind of, oh, this is a bit much. This is not why I chose my field. So I was thinking, have you ever thought about, like, could there be like some stairs or some levels? I mean, how do you start? Well, how do you ease them into it? That's my question, I think.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that whoa, this is not why I chose my field. And actually, when we have a conversation with them, oftentimes it is why they chose their field. They love what they do, right? They absolutely love it. And when they can't solve a problem in their lab, they are frustrated. And that frustration drives them. And then they get through that frustration, and then they feel joy. And so actually they are emotional beings, and these emotions were part of why they got in here in the first place. And so, yeah, here we're talking about social emotions, which are a little bit different than the kind of epistemic emotions I'm talking about right there. But nonetheless, that teachers do recognize emotions in themselves when we give them the space to do so.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And we have the next 2 presenters. They are talking about academic selves and dialogue, and it's Marcus Well and Fernando Maruenta Flueja.
So, good afternoon. My name is Fernando. I'm university professor at the University of Valencia here in Spain in the field of didactics and school organization. My teaching is on social education and social economy, and my research on vocational education and training and social inclusion.
And my name is Markus. I'm working at the Zurich University of Teacher Education. I'm head of Department of Adult and Higher Education. And yeah, I have kind of two sides of my soul. I do some research in systems of education, and I just come from a staff meeting, from a board meeting, sorry, which I had to attend online because I'm also responsible for 45 staff members for the strategic development of our department and for a budget of 4 to 5 million, and that has to be negotiated today, just before I'm doing my talk, and I'm very happy that I'm here now because I skipped the last part of my board meeting. So what did you come to this stage, Fernando?
That these 45 million were Swiss francs and not euros. No, that was only a joke.
4.5.
I was challenged by Markus. We have met back in 2013, I think. And we were meeting and working and sharing life experiences a couple of years ago in Zurich. And he invited me to come here, and I told him, no, I have a basic user knowledge of higher education. That's not my field of research. That's not my field of lecturing. So I happen to work here, but then he pushed me to come here, so I felt threatened in a way, but challenged by someone who is younger than me, someone in which I see agentic features, because he's courageous and is always attempting to do new things, so not afraid of anything as far as I know. And so I said, okay, well, why not? It's Salamanca, I can afford it. Not that far as some of the places that you come, like Connecticut, right? So here I am. And what made you come here and have me in?
Yeah, maybe the story goes back a bit longer. When I was graduating from school, all my friends did study economics, and I studied pedagogy. So I was always in a kind of explaining what I'm doing there. And since 15 years, I'm working now in a managerial position in higher education. And when I talk to my friends who studied economics, we are actually doing exactly the same job. So I felt like, oh, I ended up with doing something very different to become somebody I never wanted to be. And that was something I always could discuss with Fernando, and I just thought, yeah, let's do it on stage and maybe put some concepts and reflections behind that. So I use the concept of meta-reflexivity. You won't find slides on that. You have to talk to me if you want to know more. It's a concept of professionalization developed by Kramer, who says there are three stages of professionalization. The first is reflection. So I'm reflecting on what I'm doing. I can do that alone without Fernando. Then the second stage is multi-perspectivity, and here you come into place because the othering, the discussion, how is it in Valencia, how is it in your scientific field, how has it been 10 years ago, and so on, that was very important to me. And the last one is meta-reflexivity, which actually means that we are reflecting on this kind of, what are ways of producing these kind of knowledge reflections that are kind of convenient to our professional field, maybe extraordinary, maybe outside our comfort zone, that we definitely have to say. That made me come here, and that's concepts I'm drawing on. And I know you have not only read, but also drawing on another concept of resonance. Maybe you can tell something about that.
Yes, thank you. The notion of resonance, I learned from a German colleague who was working on that, comes from a philosopher, Hartmut Rosa. He's the third generation or so from the Frankfurter Schule, right? And what I found attractive here is that Rosa's view is that we are in an accelerated world, and we all experience that in our daily life, in our daily work. But as opposed to what some like me would think, that we should slow down, he's suggesting that there's no way to slow down, that this is the pace that we have to follow, but that we should find space for resonance in some places of what we are, and we should move and then run or be accelerated in these positions where we find resonance, right? He has written several things. Some of them are booklets that can be read in half an hour. And he has written huge books. And in the one where he addresses the notion of resonance, he devotes a chapter to education and a chapter to work. And so even if I was fascinated by this notion of resonance and I found it appealing, when I read the chapter on education, I said, well, this fellow must know a lot about philosophy, but not that much about education, because he has a very overall view on it. I hope he's not in the... Is Harmut Rosa in the room? That's good. And on the other side, he also wrote a chapter on work. And because that's part of my research as well, I thought that it could give me good reason to consider both things, right? And here's when I come to this process, that is also part of why I accepted the invitation from Marcus to come here, because he was suggesting more to engage into a process before coming to Salamanca, starting in September 25, right? Rather than writing a paper, which we didn't. And this process has given us both homework to do, and in the dialogues that we had online, and in the occasions that we had to think to prepare the next online meeting, I found at least some spaces for resonance there. I don't know what it was with you, right? I hope it was, because both of us are here performing what we didn't read, right? So that's it on a side. And from here, I think we could move to a couple of questions that we had prepared. So we have another slide here, right? Okay. So in this process, well, I think that we could move from one to the other. In this process, where we were approaching Salamanca, we decided to share some questions that we had for the other person, right? And so, well, yesterday evening we were having a nice ice cream in the beautiful Plaza Mayor in Salamanca. We were discussing, because we knew that we had little time, still 5 minutes to go, so which questions we felt like sharing with you today, right? And so, Marcos, as opposed to me, you have changed positions in several times. I always work in University of Valencia, even if I was traveling abroad. What made you change, and what difficulties have you found in trying to keep balance between academic and management work?
Yeah, that's a question about balance that I was introducing also when I was introducing myself. At the beginning, I didn't make proper decisions, I would say. I just said that I don't want to do that, and the other doors are open. So I used opportunities to come into certain positions. Coming from PhD studies, I thought, research is maybe not the road to continue, maybe research but not becoming a professor, because I know they are only doing managerial stuff. And that's where I ended 15 years later, not becoming a professor, but still doing the managerial stuff. So maybe that was a decision I took and found a balance. I wanted to avoid that kind of managerial and keep working with the content, maybe not as a hardcore researcher, but part of it definitely. And the position changing the latest position that I changed really was content-based, where I said, okay, this new position, there are the three fields: adult education, higher education, vocational education. I'm coming from these three fields, so this position is right for me. And that was how I kind of tried to find a balance. And there's another thing I didn't mention at the beginning. Throughout my career, I did one thing when I couldn't answer these questions, which I think a lot of academics do. It's distancing, emotionally distancing. So that's sarcasm. I use irony and sarcasm. I was just told we have to sell more education. Yeah, I can tell you, I have to sell. I just forgot my jacket. I'm sorry, but I'm selling education. Isn't that sad? In a way, so I'm distancing myself from my own job. It's part of the story, and it's part of the balance where I came to distancing. And what was, I would like now to ask you, what did you find most surprising when preparing this dialoguing talk?
Well, the first surprise to me was that a younger, courageous colleague who knew that I was reluctant to new technologies, reluctant to use artificial intelligence, still walking around cities that are not unfamiliar to me with paper maps instead of with Google Maps, right? That he was having me in, right? You have mentioned that you wanted, or you have distanced yourself from this sarcasm that you had, right? I think that process along these months in dialogue with Marcus have helped me move away from the resignation that I felt. You know that I am a bit far older than Marcus, so I was already starting looking towards my retirement. Still way to go, but thinking about that, right? But then it felt like, no, you cannot resign. You cannot wait all these years to come behaving as you are, so you should, or you might try, attempt to do something else, so that was fine there. You helped me also come out of the isolation. I have isolation because with this resignation, I look at my colleagues, at my own university, at my department with certain despair or lack of hope, right? And also with, you know, university professors, so self-sufficiency, right? If we are talking about communities of practice, I might be leading one, right? Emotions, not a problem with me, it's the rest who suffer, right? And so to step out of this self-sufficiency and to see how fragile and vulnerable you can also be, and to be able to discuss that, even if in a way, and this was also a surprise, in these discussions with you, I felt like home abroad and foreign at home, because I wondered along these months, and I could share that with a few colleagues back at home, why can I discuss these things in depth and express myself with someone who is miles away from me in a different university, and that cannot happen here at home where I am, right? And so I think this was a process for us. It will be continued, right? So there's no this, that's all folks that appeared in the Tiny Toons years ago, Looney Tunes, right, was it? And you want to say a final word to it?
Maybe as a wrapping up, we used the conceptualization of Rosa and Kramer, the meta-reflexivity and the resonance, to build categories and to address questions. So we work with questions for self-reflection, for multi-perspectivity, and the meta-reflexivity is to come to discuss the ways how we as professionals can come into dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is that Mike? Yeah. Thank you so much to those two. And I'm honored to present the last presenter, which is me. Thank you for having me. In this conceptual talk, I want to reflect on the role and identity of academic developers, and especially on the tension between liminality and belonging. Academic developers work across several domains. We do faculty development aimed at enhancing educational quality. We do research in and about higher education. And we do different kinds of support and advisory work for management and academic communities. Barth and Smith describe this broad mandate, and it's close to the formal responsibilities given to many academic development units. My own starting point was my advancement to Professor of Academic Development. In the Norwegian tenure system, I had to submit what we call a profiling portfolio. For the introductory chapter, I reflected on my professional practice and personal development over the past 12 years in light of research on the academic developer role. I synthesized around 40 research articles from the past 25 years from central journals in the field. This was not a formal literature review, so today I'm not presenting it as a paper. Rather, I want to share a conceptual reflection that grew out of this work. What struck me was that descriptions of the AD role were often far more negative than one would expect from the mandates we are given. At the same time, my own experience made me ask whether liminality can also be a powerful vantage point. I will organize the talk around 3 themes: the one who does not belong, the player within the system, and the one who belongs in many places. Much of the literature describes ADs as migrants, as Maury and colleagues put it, or as third space professionals following Whitchurch. We are professionals who move between academic disciplines, teaching and research environments, institutional leadership, support units, and the broader academic community without fully belonging to any of them. In Figure 1, I have visualized this position as a segmented circle presenting these different communities, with the academic developer segment placed apart from the rest of the circle. This position can be uncomfortable. Kensington Miller and colleagues describe ADs as working in institutional cultures where we must fit in, while our existence and role may be constantly questioned. Howland and Staniforth write about being on the wrong side of what it means to be an academic or a support person or a researcher or an institutional agent. It is easy to see how this can create insecurity and a defensive professional identity. Dybowski even describes ADs as having to work through influence, alliances, stealth, and lobbying in order to be seen as a source of insight and ideas. For me, this literature resonated, but it also felt incomplete. Academic developers have very different backgrounds. Some bring an established identity from their own academic field into the role. Others, including myself, are what Howland and Staniforth call academic developers. We do not come from a professional discipline or academic environment that we can build upon. This can make the need for legitimacy more visible, but it also gives a certain freedom. Latuca's idea of conceptual interdisciplinarity captures this well. The academic development question is central in our work, and the disciplines matter only insofar as they help us answer the question. This leads to my second theme, the AD as a player within the system. Recent research has expanded the focus from developing individuals to strategic educational leadership. ADs are not only workshop facilitators. We also work with policy development, implementation, institutional strategies, and long-term educational change. Figure 2 summarizes the different roles ADs take in this larger system. I call it the player within the system because the academic developer has to play their cards strategically, depending on where they are positioned. Figure 2 illustrates my understanding of the AD roles described in the literature, which I placed along 2 axes. A vertical axis distinguishing between leadership and policies from the individual employee, and a horizontal axis showing the domestication, liberation continuum, in which the AD may represent institutional interests, those of individual academics, or a combination, depending on the context. 7 distinct roles emerge. The political player, focused on the institutional self-preservation. The change agent, seeking institution-wide transformation in values and practices. The broker and enforcer, mediating between leadership and the academic community. The go-between, translating policy into concrete benefits for individual staff. The linker and enabler, working through quiet, individualized support. And the advocate, who draws on values and integrity to defend the core tasks of higher education when institutional priorities conflict with them. At first glance, these roles seem fragmented, but in practice, they often coexist in one person. In my own years as an academic developer, I have taken on roles that felt comfortable and rewarding, and others that created tension or reduced my impact. The same role could strengthen my integrity and my work with one community, but weaken it with another. This is why I find the concept of strategic leadership useful. ADs who thrive need to understand both top-down requirements and the lived realities within the departments with the individual faculty members. And this brings me to the personal dimension. What appeals to me here is that the literature moves away from the strategic and political games and returns to the human, values-based, and personal side of academic development. Willis and Strivens argue that values are at the core of the AD's professional identity, and that trust depends not only on doing what we promise, but on whether our actions demonstrate the values we claim. Several researchers argue that lasting change does not come from neutral expertise alone, but from warm and caring and reciprocal relationships. In such relationships, faculty members may feel secure enough to reveal vulnerabilities and engage in deeper pedagogical development. This is also where Lev and Wenger's concept of communities of practice becomes important. Communities can give ADs belonging, collegiality, and recognition, and become part of our self-image and identity. My own experiences strongly support this. After several years of establishing my position and credibility as an AD professional, I moved towards a different approach, driven by my personal values and my integrity, where I could also allow myself to develop as a learner and academic developer. This allowed me to become part of various distinct communities that I can honestly say I belong to and identify with. Being able to move between these communities gives me strength and support when I have to take on more demanding academic development roles. They also connect me with broader expertise, so I do not have to carry my role alone. This is why I want to return to Figure 1 and revise it. The figure shows the same circle as Figure 1, with sections for different communities within the institution. This time, the academic developer is not a separate segment, but is part of all of these communities, as illustrated by the small circle inside the larger circle. For me, this is a central shift. Rather than understanding ourselves as the ones who do not belong, academic developers can become the ones who belong in many places. This does not remove the complexities, power imbalances, or fragile aspects of the role. Our position may still be questioned, but the ability to move among communities can become a source of agency if it is grounded in integrity, belonging, and a clear sense of purpose. That is the version of liminality I want to argue for today. Not liminality as marginalization, but liminality as the possibility of belonging in many places. Thank you. Any questions? I have a new microphone, Bear. You need to push the button.
Hi, my
No, just push it once so it turns green and then... Once more? Hello? No.
Hello, sorry.
Yes.
My name is Lydia Watson, and I'm from Canada University, Capilano University. Thank you so much for this. I feel like everything you said resonated with what I feel like I'm going through and what my colleagues are going through right now. So, yeah, I just wanted to, it's more of just a comment of appreciation. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, in the back.
Hello, my name is Mette from Aarhus University. Congratulations with your professorship and with the model.
Thank you. Hi, Denmark.
Hi, Norway. I like that you went back to the first model because I wondered why the academic developer was outside of the model. But I can also see now that when you place the yellow ring in all the other segments, that what if you as an academic developer was not a trained researcher, did not teach any students, or come from another background that does not allow you to have a liminal position or liminality within these fields? How do you think about the model then? And do you know any, not solutions maybe, but reflections we should consider?
I still feel like even if I would not be doing research, or I am not teaching students, I'm only teaching faculty, I still work with the people who do. And to show them that like when for example, let me say that I work with teachers who teach students, but I don't. But I might have tried something pedagogical with the faculty and they never showed up, or it was a complete failure. Then I can still say, I know how it feels. I've tried these things too. It might work with your students. These are your options. You have to make your own decisions, but I'm there to support you because I've been there. Or the same with the researchers. Like if I want to help someone apply for a promotion through SOTL, and I am not in the research track myself. I'm in the second career path that's based on academic development. Then I can say, okay, I might not know all these research methods and the research funding you do, but I know where you can go because I have this network of people that I know and I can connect you to different people. So I feel like you're still part of all of these communities. And that being said, I am the only academic in my academic development unit, and it is just so nice to be here and be a part of this community for this week, so that's very nice. Then I think we need to finish. Thank you. And just as a very final thing, I want to thank Monica, because your emails have always been so warm and personal that I think everybody who sent you an email might have felt that you really care and are warm towards people. So you made us feel like this part of the community too. So thank you.
I won't repeat myself, so very welcome here. I'll give the floor to the first presenter. Okay. Did I get a thumbs up over there? It was okay? Good, thank you. And the first presentation will be about an academic integrity rescue mission in the AI era. Please.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. My name is Olivia. My Chinese name is Yiqing Sang. This project is done as a part of our university's AI plus education strategy. Our university has like a 5-pillar strategy, so this project is a small part of it. Let me see how I can. Yeah, so I work for XJTLU, Xi'an Jiaotong Liverpool University. It is a joint venture university based in China, in Suzhou, not far from Shanghai. I don't know if any of our audience have been to the region, but it's hot there now. And we are also a partner, because our transnational university, so we are affiliate of Liverpool University. So studying the university gets 2 degrees. One is the Chinese one is the British one. So a bit of background, the challenge. So the challenge is that AI is everywhere, and before this course was delivered, students are kind of in a maze. They don't really know what is acceptable, what is not acceptable in terms of how to use AI in their coursework. And also when the teachers are not sure as well. Now we have kind of like the traffic light system and stuff, but back then there was not, I'm talking about it, sound like it's a long time ago, but it's not. Just because on the timeline of GenAI development, it seems to be so long, but we were talking about like a year ago. It's not clear, so the university felt that they need to, A, update the academic integrity policy, B, to give students more support in terms of understanding what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, right? So the policy was updated. At the same time, we developed this course. And that's kind of chaotic because we didn't really know what the policy is going to be. So we end up with updating our original 5-category academic policy. I don't know if you have something similar in your institution, but giving more information about AI, right? So for example, if it's category A, just like a minor offense, what it meant before was that you cite cite something wrong, or you forgot to cite something, like a small bit of thing, it is a problem. But now with AI, it might mean that if you cite something that the AI made up, it is also wrong, and it might be category A, right? It can be some kind of deduction of the points. And at the same time, we felt that, wait a minute, we don't want to just stop there because the current support for students is really limited. And the academic integrity policy, it's very hard for students to understand. It's long. I don't want to read it. I only read it when I grade things. I don't really want to read it. So we thought maybe it is an opportunity for us to reduce some of the things. So we partnered with 6 students from digital education. We were very lucky to have them. And we told them and say, you know, you have, because they are from digital education, they have the ability to make things more engaging. They've had all their training, but they haven't got time and opportunity to try on some real module. And we thought, this is an opportunity for you. So we recruited them as student partners. And that time I told them and said, read the academic integrity policy and translate into a language that's going to be understandable to your fellow students. So basically, that's what they helped us to do. And because we wanted to make it more engaging, we made it into a narrative. So it's about stories travelers could travel back in time and try to rescue those poor animals. We made it animals because we wanted to be neutral. You probably saw it in the news, and professors got into trouble because they were using Chinese names on the screen when they were saying academic integrity issues. And people were, as Chinese students, confronted the professor it was like, I think it's at Harvard or, I don't remember. Anyway, in a US context, and said, other students from other nationalities do that too. Why are you using Chinese names? And I'm thinking maybe, male students might also have this dilemma as female students. So we're using animals. And what we did is that in the past, it was more like a MOOCs kind of style, and it's click, read, watch some videos, do a quiz, these kind of things. But we thought, wait a minute, we can make it more realistic. So, and with AI, it's not that difficult to do like graphic illustration. There was a project that my colleague in the University of Liverpool did. It's about multimodal, how AI made multimodal so easy. And we thought, this is something that we can do. And so that's what we did. And at the same time, we collected real cases from the schools. Because we thought, if you just talk about, it's like talking to the students with theories. They forget. They talk to them about policies. Guess what? They forget, right? But if we talk to them in terms of like cases with dialogues and videos, and then they will be able to understand more. So we had, as I was showing, these animals representing year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, and postgraduate students. And we used H5P. Anybody has used H5P in your? Oh, great, thank you. Yes, this is free to some extent. If you want it to be fancy, it's always not free, right? But it's integrated with those learning management system. We use Moodle, so it's deeply embedded in it, very easy, and the text is optimized. So students had choices. So basically, they will present the different choices, which come from real cases. And we also try to translate the policy into an infographic, which students don't care what category and what kind of category offense they have. They care about how many points I'm going to be deducted, if I'm going to be expelled of the university. Will I need to redo this course, right? So this is what we did. And because of the topic of academic integrity, it is sensitive. It's very difficult for students to come up to a fellow student and say, hey, you know what, I may have made this mistake. They're going to use it against them if, and they are worried about being judged. And it's very difficult for them to come to their tutors. When I ask my students, did you use AI? They always give me this vague answer. But having been dealing with AI for so long, I know, like from first glance, I can see if they use AI or not. But it's, sensitive issue. So we want it to be like a tree hole. Kind of students can understand, can be able to consult discreetly. And then we had this chatbot embedded on our learning management system, which we trained on the policy document and with the 37 real cases. So it understands the university policy pretty well, using the RAG, retrieval augmented generation technology. So, for example, students would say, okay, I found some good ideas from a book. I used some ideas for my assignment, but I did not cite it. Would it be okay? And the answer would be, it might fall into category C. You might think of this and that. So it's just kind of like something that student can use. So I know I'm running out of time, so I'm speeding up. When I was doing this, I used this participatory action research approach. So basically, we did some redesign, and then we piloted the course and collected students' and faculty's feedback. And so basically we did 7 expert review, and then we did 10 faculty focus groups. Focus groups with 10 faculties. I think it's 4 meetings and then 4 student interviews. So it seems like they really loved it. And I was initially worried that if the Gen AI generated stuff would make that content, less credible or something. They were not worried at all, and they really loved it, the interactivity of it, because initially I also worried that I'm making, it was used to be serious, this click, and then, kind of like read very common higher education kind of style. Now it makes a little bit of funny or a little bit of fun. Would the leadership not like it? It turns out they also like it. So that's a big relief for me. And it worked really well with our student partners. They really helped it to translate it into their knowledge, and they also felt this showcased the responsible use of AI. So, but we found some issues when in our pilot. For example, we found more interesting scenarios when we talked to the student and the faculty. So we are hoping to incorporate that in. And some instructions are not clear, and like pre and post assessment might be helpful. So we are collecting more student feedback. So that's the end. And if any of you would like to collaborate, because we are also we've collected the pilot data. We are doing more research on this topic. If any of you would like to collaborate and use it in your institution, feel free to let me know. I would be happy to share any with H5P. It's basically you download it and you upload to your LMS, and it's totally customizable. Thank you.
Thank you. Some questions from the audience or remarks?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Elke from KU Leuven. And we, with a very small team, we're designing exactly this, so a gamified course on academic integrity, but we were designing it in a different system, not Moodle, and it turned out into something that this is so much better. So my first question was, can we get access? So I will be emailing you. But the second question was something that came up in another session. So you used students to optimize this. And my question to you is, were they paid for this, or was this kind of part of their training? Because you mentioned the field they were studying, but I didn't catch it.
Well, yeah, is it possible to?
Yes, I will just come there.
Yeah, so it's not working, that one?
It's not
It
working
is.
now.
Okay, yeah,
Hello?
good.
Okay, it works now. Great. But I will stay here. And to your question, first question, yes, you can get access to our module if you would like to. I can set up guest access for you. And the second question is that students, yes and no, because in our educational studies program, we create a lot of opportunities for students to work with the industry. It's like from the day one, they are looking for authentic issues to work on. So we also have 1 semester of students going into the industry and work with the industry experts. I was the mentor for many students. So with that program, they don't get paid. But I do have TAs who also worked on this, and they get paid just because how the program was made. But they created many of these resources like the CAD and stuff. But I also had 2 instructional designers giving them guidance, because at the first, when I told them, be innovative, and they were afraid to innovate. I said, translate the thing into your language. They were afraid to do that. So it took them time to really release their potentials and to do things. And sometimes they may also, because it's a high-level project, so we also needed to make sure that everything is going to be okay. Otherwise, we get an email from the president and say, you said this and that, and it's not what we do. Thank you.
Thank you. And this is just an example. I think in so many sessions, I hear so many generous offers to share material between each other. I think it's so great. Thank you. Another comment or question? I hear you also inventing the wheel again and again and again. Good thing that we get information.
We might have different policies as well, so you can't use exactly, but the idea of using gamification, yeah, that's, and the techniques, yeah, it's very generous of you to share it. Thank you.
No problem. And I want to comment on reinventing the wheel. Actually, I had another colleague who used to work in our university, and he went to Japan, and he was asked to create this kind of things too. He had his version, different, but yeah. So we sort of looked at his idea and then did our idea. So if only everybody could collaborate together, and then there will be a wonderful project, I think, for many universities.
I think so too. And a good cause that you highlighted now is that, of course, you have to start with your own policies. But if there's a place for you to put in the policies and then use the rest of the ideas, that would be great. I agree. Thank you very much.
No problem.
And now it's time for our second talk, and it is about reflection. So, and I was surprised when we prepared this session in total. Don and Constance said Ron said that we don't have a PowerPoint presentation, and I was like, what? So we will be without PowerPoint, but a live session. Please. Sure. And there are two mics, so
good.
All right, yeah. Well.
Third is her husband, Mike.
You all are so kind. Oh, can you hear me okay? No? Okay, wonderful. Hi, my name's Constanza Bartolome.
Ron Washburn.
And just for positionality, I'm an educational developer or an academic developer at the university, Bryant University in Rhode Island in the USA.
And I teach legal studies faculty member. I've been in higher ed for 30 years and Bryant for 24 years.
So you might ask yourselves, what are these two doing together? I love the teaching center where I work in. Ron is, we shouldn't have favorites, but he's one of my favorite faculty member. And today we're going to talk about reflection. So our presentation title is The Space Between the Notes, and we're going to talk about reflection and just sort of pausing. How many folks in here feel like they never have enough time? Okay, so almost everyone here, right? We usually don't view time as a pedagogical tool, but rather as something that is working against us or not in our favor. And so I'd like for us in this brief 10 minutes that we have together to reconsider time as a pedagogical tool that we can leverage. So to go off of our colleague Olivia's presentation, with the advent of AI and sort of in this post-pandemic world that we're living in, we're looking at how we deliver content in very different ways, right? Because content is perhaps more easily accessible than it ever was before. And for that reason, combined with the many disruptions that we've had in higher education, just given circumstances, for us, we've had a couple of blizzards within the last semester, definitely not the heat that we're experiencing now. Faculty will often come to the teaching center and say, oh my goodness, class was canceled. I don't have enough time to cover what I had planned. And so they use or view time as something that they are in deficiency of rather than something that they can leverage. So Ron and I got to talking and we said, okay, well, this is a problem that we can solve. How can we make faculty think about time as something that is an asset? So I want to talk a little bit today about some changes that he and I have made in our work. One thing I've said to faculty, and it scares them, is you don't have to cover everything, okay? And when I say that to you, how do you typically in the past, how would you have felt about that?
I think so you get a real, I know I talk to adjuncts and whatnot, and they're disgruntled and they're terrified. Like, I have this long syllabus I got to get through. I have 35 students in our classes, and I have to give them these exams. I have to grade it, and they want feedback. And how do I get through it all, right? And it really doesn't matter.
Yeah.
As long as we do the important things.
Right, exactly. So if we think about content, we think about time in a way of backwards design. What matters is what is most important, right? So how do we leverage that? So I tell our faculty, you can have days of reflection that you put in your syllabus. And they say, what? I have permission to do that? Yes, because if there's a blizzard, then you have that time already built in. When we give our students so much content, they are overloaded. So that cognitive overload is a real thing. So when we really focus on, okay, what are our learning objectives? What do we really want our students to get to know? We're then thinking more in terms of what Ken Bain says about deep learning. What should we really focus in on rather than surface level learning, right? Because if we pack so much into a session or into a semester, they may miss the mark in terms of what's important. So Ron, is there, something that maybe you adapted within the last 5 or 6 years in terms of your own teaching style just based upon this approach?
It kind of buffers a lot of the things you talked about with your program. I love that whole storytelling piece where you allow them to go through these gamified tools that really cement the concepts. So for me, it's taking the theory like that, these legal theories that I teach, but trying to apply them in the real world. Storytelling, things I've done in the past and representing clients, or certainly bringing in real world examples. And it always turns out on my evaluations, it always says, the best part was the stories. The best part was this that I remembered. It tends that they take those things away from them. So, and also for me, just not getting overwhelmed by a syllabus.
Yeah, storytelling is a great meaning-making tool. It's a great pedagogical technique because oftentimes, students can make connections based off that. Anyone here read Small Teaching by James Lang? Yeah, so he talks, if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. He talks a lot about this idea of connection notebooks, right? So having students connect what it is they're learning into their everyday, they tend to focus in on it more. Coverage does not equal learning, right? So just because you've talked about something in class doesn't mean that your students have had enough time to absorb it. So when you give them time to pause and reflect, in other words, the space between the notes or the pauses between the classes, it lets them actually like a sponge absorb the information.
And then if you think about those in your classroom who may have some neurodivergent issues, or that they just learn differently, or they need time to just absorb information. I learned a tremendous amount from my son. My son is on the autism spectrum, and the way he learns is he gets overwhelmed, he gets frustrated. But if you give him little bits and let him absorb them and let him practice with it, he learns them, and he's an A student as a result of that. So everyone's different. It's a great way to kind of bring belonging to the classroom.
Yeah, speaking of getting frustrated, one program that we have at our school that I think is tremendous for faculty is a program called the Creativity Fellows program. So we actually give stipends to faculty to engage in a beginner learner experience, doing something that they've never done before. And Ron, he loves our teaching center, bless him.
All about it.
He was one of our Creativity Fellows. What did you use your stipend on?
I have a blacksmith forge. I like to make things out of metal, so I was using that in my classroom. I bring that. I like to make jewelry and little objects and all kinds of things, and I brought that into the classroom as well. And a lot of students picked up on that, and they realized, wow, creativity is important. Because a lot of times in law, at least what I teach, they lose creativity. It's not pushed very well. But it was neat to bring that in, I think, as changing up pace a little bit. And I think that's important to change pace. I think that's really what space between the notes is all about, too.
Yeah, and just giving our faculty some time to engage in their own creativity, right? Because when I ask them, have you learned anything new lately? Ron will talk to me about legal studies, and I'll say, no, outside of your field, right? What have you learned outside of your discipline? So also giving opportunities for faculty and for students to engage with your material in a way that they may not before. So perhaps instead of consistently giving readings, you have them engage in a concept map. Perhaps you have them do a scavenger hunt for information. Different ways to engage the brain so that...
Different types of assessment.
Correct,
right?
Yeah, leveraging universal design for learning. So if there's anything that you've learned from our brief time together, I'm keeping an eye on the clock in case there are questions. I'd love for you all to leave with thinking about time not as a glass half empty, but a glass half full mentality. We have a larger workshop where we talk about this longer. It's really hard to condense it into 10 minutes. But I would welcome any questions that you might have about the collaborations we've done, how we view time, pedagogy, or anything else. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, exciting ideas of just allowing time without cramping stuff up. Here's a question.
I'm so sorry I've sat in a very awkward place for you to come all the way over. Thank you so much for your presentation. And it's nice to kind of have a presentation where it feels like you were just both in conversation. It's quite a different style of delivery, but I really enjoyed that, so thank you. My question was around whether you've experienced any kind of kickback from students, and I suppose maybe this is slightly directed towards Ron, is it? Sorry, yes. Ron. Have you had any kickback from students where they've been sort of like resistant to the idea of taking time because they maybe have the perception that if they're not being constantly delivered content, I guess it doesn't feel like value for money or whatever that horrible kind of phrasing comes into it, that consumerist idea. And I suppose, do your students sort of feel as though it's not delivering on what they have expectations of?
Right. I think if you look at the course in its totality, I think by the end they get it. And I think along the way, there's always students who aren't really, they're confused, they don't get it, they don't buy into the system or whatever. And as you get it, at least from my experience, they get it over time. And if your class has a reputation as well, that comes along with it too. So I teach mostly sophomores, the class I'm thinking about, and I really can't say I've had a ton of kickback. I've had more kickback when students were being force-fed. As we got to work, okay, we've got a 50-minute class, boom, we're cranking through 50 minutes, or whatever it is, and not stopping, not like reiterating. I get more pleasant evaluations based on the fact that we took time to practice concepts, or that way, and I think that far outnumbers those. But you have to make everyone happy all the time either.
So I'll also say I teach foreign language, and I have my students not just give me verb conjugations, but their why behind them. And when I have native speakers of Spanish, porque también hablo español, they'll always say, well, this just sounds right, profesora. This is just correct. I just know it's right. And I had one student in particular 5 years ago. She hated the reflection. She absolutely, I think she hated me. And right? Have we been there? She hated the reflections. And I ran into her while I was out to eat a couple years ago, and she said, Profesora, do you remember me? And I said, yes. And she said, do you remember those reflections? I said, I sure do. And she says, well, at Christmas dinner last year, we were having an intense debate at home over the grammatical structure of a sentence, and I knew the why, so thank you. So our students don't always know that they're learning in the moment, or they don't always know our pedagogical why, even if we explain it to them. But again, with time, no pun intended, sometimes those lessons sink in.
Thank you. Yes?
Hi, I used to be the instructor who thought I had to fit in every single word at the beginning, and I thought that was like a sign of a good instructor. And then and then I think 5-10 years ago, I was like, that seems like a lot of work. And so I just really chilled out and tried to focus on what was really important. And now when I see other instructors being like old me, I want to tell them, hey, why don't you go back to the learning objectives, see what, 5 things you really want these students to be able to do at the end of the term, and focus on that. But I feel like it's kind of talking down to them, hey, y'all ought to chill out. And if anybody tells me to chill out, I don't like that. And so how has your reaction from other faculty been with these ideas?
So I've been working with my discipline in trying to, this one core course that we serve our entire College of Business, so we run around 30 sections, an academic year on it. And all those faculty we got together were trying to establish uniformity amongst the course, and kind of built it into that we all figured out, okay, what do we want to cover, right? We've got these many topics. What do we want to cover? What do all of us usually cover? And from that, we're able to just, we're able to just circle and kind of put the 5 main ones, like you said, and that was the way to do it. I don't think going up and saying, Katzanza, I can't tell you, you're just teaching too much. It's never going to work. No.
Okay, so we deal with the teachers and the students, and short, last question.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a way of using student feedback, because I'm sure you reviewed,
Yep.
and to kind of over time
That's it.
compare those and say, might it be that it's too much?
Exactly. And we've looked at that. We've looked at others. We've compared feedback amongst faculty, evaluations, and we have seen some students are just like, this course is brutal. I can't get through the information. I'm giving up. Because that can happen over time. Versus the course load or the speed of the course was what I wanted. The pace was good. So that is a great way to look at it.
Great. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Again. And now, time for our third presentation, Ijeoma. Ijeoma, sorry. And I'll give the floor to you. Yes, and this one is it.
Thank you. I won't hold my notes as well. Hi, everybody. Can folks, you can hear me all right? Great. And can folks see me okay? I'm not sure if great. All right, I'm going to try to put this here and hope that that's going to be fine. I think it's going to be fine. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here and welcome. My talk is called All That You Change Changes You, Student Artwork as Dialogue with the Institution. My name is Ijeoma Njaka. I am a senior learning designer at Georgetown University, located in Washington, D.C. So I work in a unit called the Red House. We're called the Red House because our office is in this red house. And so we're a curriculum and innovation hub for the university. We were established in 2013, and we are also entirely gift funded. And for some additional context, Georgetown University is a private Jesuit institution and established in 1789. Oh, yeah.
Is that too close? Maybe that microphone?
Oh, wait, this one works. I'm going to use this one instead. Yeah, but this one works, which is great. Oh, no. Okay, wow. All right. Okay.
Maybe shut down the other microphone. Yeah. So, yeah, we should, or you give it to me and I'll stand in the back of the room.
All right. Is this better? Okay. I think so. Great. Okay. Look, someone's coming, so I don't know if I should. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. Yeah, this is great. This works. Okay, so hi again. I work at a unit called the Red House. This is a picture of our Red House. So, and again, we're curriculum. We do curriculum innovation and transformation for the university. We are, as I mentioned before, in case you didn't hear me, we're entirely gift funded. We were established in 2013. We're housed at Georgetown University, which is a private Jesuit institution located, again, in DC. And one interesting thing about Georgetown, there are lots of interesting things, but one of them is that it's an institution that includes deep ties to enslavement, and so as part of its history. And so as a result, it's an interesting context in which to do this work. And one of the fundamental beliefs that we have at the Red House is on this sign here. It says, yes, a university can reinvent itself. And so it's with this background, context, and this ethos, as well as the support of my amazing and creative colleagues that I get to present this talk to you today. So, all that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. These lines come from the novel Parable of the Sower, which is by the Black American speculative fiction writer Octavia Butler. And I picked these lines because they resonate with me, and they resonate for a few reasons, particularly because as an educator and an academic developer, I appreciate this quote because it feels aspirational for me, and I also feel like it's something that we can see to be true in this work. So, all that you touch, you change. I think we can see this when, for instance, working one-on-one with a faculty member to help them redesign something in their course, or for those of us that teach, Maybe it happens at the end of the semester when you see that different ideas and lessons from the course, students have applied those in really interesting ways and in ways you hadn't yet imagined. And for all that you change, changes you. As educators, we know this also describes what happens when you learn with other people. And so if we're improving or working to improve academic experiences for students, that means we're testing things, we're stretching ourselves, and we're responding to different situations with knowledge that we've gained from our experiences. Helping students and faculty learn and build skills helps us learn and build skills. And so while Butler offers what I think is a great distillation, the Brazilian educator Paulo Freire discusses how this works in the context of education. And so Freire writes that people as beings in a situation find themselves rooted in conditions which mark them and which they also mark. So all that you change changes you. In his model of dialogic education, it's important that learners name the ways in which they have been marked by the structures of the world. Doing so is an act of creation, and it's a transformative act representing the learner's agency in the world. In contrast, Freire's banking model of education, in this model, the learner's main role is to just receive information from the teacher and to store it, basically, until the teacher requests it, and at that point they can kind of parrot it back. Learners in this context aren't really expected to have much agency, and they're also not expected to have really any reflection about the structures around them. And so as a result, Freire writes, the capability of banking education to minimize or annul the student's creative power serves the interests of the oppressors, who care neither to have the world revealed nor to see it transformed. So I personally am not that excited about serving the interests of the oppressors. I imagine that might be true for some of you as well. But still, it does seem like the nature of academic work, and educational development rather, is to advocate for changes within an institutional context that resists it. And so when universities herald that that they've existed for however many centuries in a model where longevity and tradition is basically the same thing as being knowledgeable, of course any dialogue or receptivity to change in that context would be threatening. Instead, I think the institutional stance here, broadly speaking, is to mark others, its students and staff, but not to be marked itself. So I kind of think that the institutional stance stops at all that you change changes you. This is not to say that universities never change, but so much meaningful change stems from protests and reactions, social and market pressures, and financial precarity. Institutional resistance isn't reflective, it's not reciprocal, it's not dialogic, and if it's not dialogic, it's oppressive. All that you change changes you. Again, it's descriptive, it's aspirational, but I've come to see it as an imperative for educational developers, right? To accept that we will be changed, that we ought to be changed, and so how do we make sure that we are changed? In 2023, we had the opportunity to renovate the outdoor space that was adjacent to the Red House. We focused on 4 key things that we wanted for the space. So 1, we wanted it to be accessible and equipped. We wanted it to be sustainable. We wanted it to have a futures orientation, and we also wanted it to center art and creativity. And these images here, this is what it looked like before. A nice space, but a bit underutilized in some ways. And this is what it looks like now. So the Baker Family Terrace now serves as an event space. It's a modular outdoor classroom for place-based learning, and it's also a student art gallery. In the last 3 years, I've been the primary convener of our terrace team at the Red House, and the idea to display student work wasn't really a stretch for the organization. Much of our curricular redesign work happens with classes, or it happens with our student staff as co-creators. However, with a gallery dedicated to student artwork, I've learned that this space is actually our commitment to institutional dialogue with students. And so by hosting this gallery, I think that we're committing to our own receptivity and committing to our own change. And I think it happens in the following ways. First, displaying student artwork means centering student visions. So when we put out a call for artwork, we're asking students, as Freire says, to share the ways in which they've been marked by the world. And the artwork is a creative way for students to do that. Moreover, most of the art that students submit to us was not something that they created for a class. So as it turns out, our students are creative, interesting beings who interact with ideas in the world in creative ways. And by asking for student artwork, our gallery can maybe sit in contrast to some of the more measured or competitive, the graded academic programs that they might otherwise find themselves in. And so hopefully that allows this space to better focus on things that students are trying to communicate in non-prescriptive ways. Secondly, displaying the artwork means engaging the artwork. So these exhibits, which have focused on mental health, well-being, and the role of play in learning, they're fundamentally experimental because we never know what students are going to submit, what kind of art they're going to send to us. But because we display the artwork and highlight the gallery as a feature of the space, we're ultimately promising to respond to the student ideas that come our way, and that we're going to do what we can to make sure that different members of the community can engage with the artwork. So to that end, all of the artwork is accompanied by interpretive materials that we, the staff, create ourselves. And so in this image on the left here, there are a couple of text boxes underneath the art. That's an example of some of our interpretive material that we create. And in order to do this thoughtfully, we have to sit with the art and any artist statements that we get, and we have to respond to them uniquely. And so as part of that engagement and responding process, for our last exhibit, which was called Playing with Process, Unlearning Limitations, that unlearning limitations phrase came directly from a student statement. And so we incorporated that into the title. And since we have to work with what we get in order to make an exhibit happen, it becomes a dialogic learning process for our academic staff. And then a third way in which we change, displaying student artwork means inviting an audience. So because we have rotating student exhibits outside on campus, these student visions are quite literally marking and changing the physical campus landscape. Moreover, we guarantee an audience for the student artwork and their ideas. And again, this gallery is outside. It's open to events, it's open to classes, and so we'll have faculty, staff, and students who come through that space. And so as a result, this can reach various community members. And Ferry adds that a dialogic educator, after seeing how learners perceive the world, ought to represent it back to the community, not in the form of a lecture, but as a way to facilitate dialogue. So in addition to hosting and helping to support the outdoor classes that happen on the terrace amidst the artwork, we also will host related events to the exhibits. And so this picture in the middle here was from the launch event for our last exhibit. And in the picture, participants, which included faculty, staff, and students, they are contributing to a collaborative painting of a landmark clock tower on campus. So they're re-envisioning this kind of clock tower that folks can see. And so that's what's going on in that middle picture, or the one on the right. And then on the left, that is a workshop that we hosted with our Center for Teaching and Learning to help introduce faculty to the space. And we've collaborated with them and the space multiple times. And so, we are still learning about what works and what could work better for our terrace. But just in case there's anybody else here who wants to host a student art gallery as part of their academic development process, I have a couple of notes and learnings to share. One, it's been really important to have a dedicated space for the artwork. You do not need to have a whole lawn in order to do this. I've done this work I've done it in a corridor. I've done it in a hallway, a dedicated wall in the library with posters. That's what that picture on the bottom of the slide is of actually. And so just having some kind of designated space to make it special has been important for us. Also having it be in a noticeable location for the artwork, just to make sure that different members of the community can encounter it, ideally, organically. Having an exploratory approach matters as well, because the artwork itself is, we intend for it to be a way to spark other dialogue. So open-ended questions have been really helpful for us in that work. And then lastly, it's important to be engaged in community, especially with faculty and students. By that, I think it's important to have a workshop, have some type of gathering so that folks can experience the artwork together. I have some resources, again, for folks who might be interested in this type of thing. Ferrari talks about using media in creative media in Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Art of Noticing by Rob Walker has lots of great examples and exercises. and so do Visual Thinking Strategies, drama-based pedagogy website from UT Austin, other scholarship that feels important, Kokos and Fleming, and the examples from the American Alliance of Museums is exhibition label writing competition. Sounds kind of dry. The examples are fascinating, and they've been really helpful for us while interpreting our work. In closing, I just wanted to underscore that for me, when I get to go to campus and I pass by the gallery outside, I'm incredibly grateful to our student artists, because seeing their creativity in the space makes it so that I can't look at the university in the same way ever again. And their work has shaped, therefore, what I see at the university, and I think it's lovely to be able to be changed in that way too. So thank you.
Thank you. Some comments or questions?
Thank you. Thank you so much for this inspiring talk. I'm just wondering, what kind of incentives did you give students to get them join this event, and especially students from outside of the art background? Because I see, I'm just imagining for students with an art background, they can put it on their CV. It's something useful. I'm asking because I feel, I'm thinking about my institution. There are so many different events for students, and all of them are very interesting. But we feel that students are not very engaging unless they perceive it as useful, or it's kind of like going back to their social life or something, you know, helping them to find girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever. So I feel it's always a compete for our faculty to get enough students to engage in outside of the curriculum events. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Olivia. So how do we incentivize students? It depends. So we've done a few different strategies. For our last exhibit, for instance, we had some contacts with some faculty members, one to ask them if they had any creative projects from their class. A couple did, but also if they just had students in their network that they wanted to send things to, and also honestly relying a lot on the student word of mouth, particularly from our student staff. I've also more than once have found just random students who saw someone drawing in like a particular, like a common space on campus, and I was like, wait, do you make art? Do you want to come check out this gallery? Because I can put your art back here if you want. So like I will show students the space, and I'll be like, we could do this if you wanted. And I think what is useful, our university, it's very pre-professional, and so there are, in my opinion, not enough sort of creative outlets, and particularly not enough art on campus. And so I think it ends up feeling like an opportunity in that way, to be very different from what they're doing. So that's how we've incentivized it so far. Also, the panels in which we hang the art up, I keep trying to tell students, I was like, you can take these when we're done with them, because storing them has actually been a little bit of a problem for us.
So it's a win-win.
Yes,
Yeah.
hopefully. Thanks.
Really, really nice talk, and congratulations with this project.
Thanks.
I was very curious. It's two questions actually. Could you give some examples of like some of the open-ended questions you asked them, and also the interpretations that are then added, as I understand, to help other faculty members understand and interpret the art. I understood that they came from you and your team, but do they also come from the students, or do you just look at the artwork after it's finished and make your interpretation? How does that work?
Yeah, so I feel like I've already forgotten your first question, so I'm going to start with the second one. So for our interpretive materials, and yeah, the open-ended question, actually, they're related.
A little bit back, I think, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of the open-ended questions, so some of the things that we might do with like the little prompts that we put next to the art is, we'll do our best to incorporate the artist statement. And so for something like the collage piece that I showed, one of the pieces that I showed, I'll talk about like, the student like the idea of bringing different things together. In terms of an open-ended question, it could be something like, what are ways in which you've brought together different ideas in order to make something else or make something new? There's another piece in the gallery where, you know, an artist was talking about this piece is trying to represent the elements of nature. And so one of the questions might be like, okay, well, you're outside right now, what elements of nature are you experiencing? They're talking about water, earth, fire, and air. You know, what are ways in which you might see that in the space around you? And so those types of open-ended questions, again, like I'm very much pulling from, frankly, good interpretive materials that I've encountered that feel accessible to folks who might not otherwise engage with art very much. And I'm not an art historian. I'm somebody who enjoys going to museums, and that's sort of my lane of expertise that I'm coming in with this with. And so those are the types of things that I end up that I work to sort of help ask and to post, that we'll have posted with the artwork, just so that folks don't just look at it and wonder, like, I wonder what this means, but are able to kind of reflect. And really just trying to figure out how to get them to stay with a piece of artwork for just a little bit longer so that hopefully they have more of an engagement with it. Thank you.
Another comment or question? Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
And I'm taking your words on congratulating all three of you of such interesting projects going on, finding new ways, going a little bit away from the tradition in so many different ways. So thank you very much for that. And we have still some minutes if you want to go back, because I rushed you a little bit, all of you. But we have some minutes left if something is lingering in the other two presentations, maybe. Yeah.
I had a question for Ron in particular. Can you say more about how you use the creativity stipend and blacksmithing in your class?
I was curious about that too.
What they do is it's called the Creative Fellow Program, and you apply for it, and it's a $750 stipend, and you can use that to develop things. And then we put on basically an event where we exhibit what we do and we talk about it, and then we integrate that into our classroom structure. So for me, for me, I love it. Because particularly, like you were saying, with pre-professional organizations like us, in the world of AI, employers say the one thing that they are still looking for is creativity. And it's a great tool to remind students that be creative, think, be outside the box. You know, there's an AI tool for that, but there's not going to be an AI tool that can replace your ability to be creative. And so I think that's for me, that's the best way it brings in. But I love that, and I want more of that. I hope I'd love to do an art exhibit on our campus more. We have a small play space now, and we have another one developing, which is pretty big too, that has all the laser tools and all whatnot, and the maker space. That's really cool, and I think it's so important. I love that. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, you guys mentioned you also had a workshop, and as I understood, it's a workshop on helping faculty understand the importance of like the in-between.
So it was at an event that we
and do you share it?
Faculty and students, actually. Yeah, it's an event that brings all the university together. It's our research and engagement day, and so the room is full of faculty and students, which is the best part. Because the workshop you and I did. What's that? Oh, I'm sorry.
Are you talking about the workshop that Ron and I did? Oh, okay.
Oh, my bad.
All good. So yes, we'll share the resources with you. Yes, we talked about how to think about time, and then we gave some exercises throughout the workshop too. I would say faculty and academic staff, so anyone who works with groups of people. I think it could be applicable towards, our audience was mostly faculty though, to be truthful, but I think you could make it your own. So yes, happy to share. Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much once again, and I call this session to a close, and see you tomorrow. See you. Oh no, see tonight already. Yeah.